click a button. But then we'll also do the Spanish introduction or availability of translation again. So go ahead, Jesus.
Hola, bienvenidos a la junta de hoy por Zoom. Si quisiera escuchar la junta en español, hay un botón de traducción abajo disponible si es que la quiere escuchar traducida en español. Gracias.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll get started. And today is the first of two meetings that we are holding both in person and virtual to talk about the community outreach and engagement strategy that's put into the early action plan of the preliminary management zone proposal. Lots of titles there. These are the reports that we prepare on behalf of our permittees in these basins. This basin meeting is covering two basins in the South Valley, three basins, the Delta Mendota Basin on the west side of the valley, the Merced Basin, and the Madera Basin. We'll go ahead for the next slide. So we have the introductions already. You can see the staff there on your left, and the consulting firm GEI and Luder Scalmanini are both working with us to prepare the plans, and you'll be hearing from the staff here later in the presentation. So next slide. So our agenda is pretty straightforward. I'm going to talk a little bit about the nitrate control program, the regulatory requirements, a little bit of overview of the sources of drinking water, and then talk about the elevated nitrate levels in the various basins. And then we'll go into the early action plan that is now available for public comment. It's posted on our website, and many of you probably got an email from us that had the link for that publicly available document. So we'll give you the plan content, the options on replacement water, and the nitrate well testing program, and then the next step of what we'll be working on in this basin and all the basins that are priority to that are have joined Valley Water Collaborative. I'll cover that in a second. Slide. You go to the next one. I'll talk about Valley Water Collaborative. So we were formed in 2021 to manage the priority 1 basins of Modesto and Turlock as they were implementing the nitrate control program in the Central Valley. So we have expanded to the other basins as a management administrative organization. And you can see our mission on the bottom is twofold, is to implement the programs to provide safe drinking water for residences in these basins. And then on the permittee side, protecting and enhancing the quality of groundwater used as drinking water. We'll talk about that first mission primarily today, a little bit on this second item of the mission in a little bit on this meeting and in future conversations. Slide. So Valley Water is managed by a board of directors that are that were named when we were started in 2021. We have 12 board members, 3 from irrigated ag, 3 from the food processor winery sector, 2 from the dairy industry, 1 poultry, and 3 metropolitan area cities. And so this board of directors sets policy and reviews the budgets, prepares budgets for now the Modesto and Turlock Basin. We are now forming advisory committees in all the other priority 2 basins that will be advising the board on budgets and other localized decisions of importance for those particular basins. So next slide. So the nitrate control program, I noticed on our attendance, many of you are part of the permittee audience, and you've heard this many times. So just in case there's some that are not being involved in this, in these earlier discussions, we are formed, as I mentioned, in 2020 to support the priority 1 basins. And we were twofold, as I mentioned, we address nitrate contamination from any of the permittees through modifications in their permits and things that they will be implementing over coming years. And then on the drinking water side, providing this free well testing for domestic wells, and then providing replacement water when a well is above the nitrate drinking water standard. So we're supported by these permit holders entirely. We do have a grant that we'll talk about later, a safer grant that provides some matching funding for outreach and administration of the organization. And as you know, we've expanded from our Modesto Turlock base to the following 5 basins that you see listed on the screen. This meeting, as I mentioned, is the Delta, Mendota, Merced, and Madera basins. Then we'll be holding another meeting tomorrow up in the Yolo and Eastern San Joaquin for the Yolo Eastern San Joaquin basins. And that meeting will be in Stockton. Slide. So in our activities with drinking water since 2021, and I get the dates mixed up. We were founded in 2020, but our drinking water program launched in 2021. So since that launch date, May of 2021, we've received over 1,300 applications for testing. We have tested, actually sent out crews to 820 private wells in the Modesto Turlock Basin. And we currently have 587 households receiving bottled water, either monthly or bi-monthly, depending on the request of the resident. And then we're year 3 on a safer grant to support additional testing of contaminants that are found in the basins where the testing is being held. It's based on previous sampling programs where we look at what's been detected and that we added those to our testing protocols that we do in these when we visit a residence. That additional testing is paid for entirely by the safer grant, whereas our organization covers half of the well testing labor and all of the nitrate costs and affiliated activities related to nitrate. So we are beginning that identical well testing effort on February 26th of next year for all the priority 2 management zones. And we'll talk a little bit later about the plan that's being created that we're asking for public comments on that will describe those activities in coming months and when the program launches in February. So next slide. So the management zone, why are we here today? Our management zone has a program to address these nitrate exceedances. Many of the small communities, rural residences in the valley rely on groundwater. There's very limited use of surface water in the Central Valley. The vast majority of both cities, small and large, and rural residences are relying on groundwater. And it may not be possible to use safely this groundwater for drinking when it has such high nitrate levels. And the early action plan that we're developing now, we want to get input on that plan for the immediate activities, but also our requirement is to develop a long-term solution to address these nitrate concerns in each of the management zones. And we'll be providing this information today. And you can watch your emails if there's comments and such we receive. We'll be circulating those to let everyone that's participating have an idea the types of comments, edits that may go into this plan. And you can see the link at the bottom of your screen where the early action, the draft EAP has been posted, and we really would like to get all our comments by November 1, so we have time to integrate those into the plan. Next slide. And by the way, if you have any questions as we're going along, don't hesitate to raise your hand there in your menu there, or wave, or just ask a question out loud without waving your hand. Okay, what is a management zone? How can I be involved? Now, again, this is outside of the permit holders, but this process that we have begun, we're reaching out to the communities. We have several hundred on our mailing list that we invited to these events. Even though they may not come today, we're going to continue outreaching to them in each of the major cities and minor to seek their involvement in this program as it's developed and as it rolls out and is being implemented over the years. So we want your involvement. The industries that I mentioned on the board of directors are also covered by many permit holders that are on this call, but they come from these four main sectors: irrigated ag, dairies and poultry, urban wastewater, and food processors, wineries. And the urban wastewater also includes small water treatment, wastewater treatment plants that may be in a rest stop or any sort of entity that has public access that's beyond a private rural residence. So we are definitely seeking input on any of the solutions that were outlined today and that you may see in the document. Next slide. So I'm going to hand it over to Barbara now to give a little bit more detail on the nitrate control program. So Barbara.
Thanks, Perry. So back in 2018, the Central Valley Water Board adopted a new regulation called the Nitrate Control Program. And the Nitrate Control Program was designed to help solve nitrate issues in the Central Valley. It laid out three main goals that are listed on this slide. So the first was providing safe drinking water supplies. The second one was reducing nitrate impacts to water supplies. And the third was restoring groundwater quality with the caveat that restoration has to be reasonable, feasible, and practicable. So anyone with a permit to discharge or release nitrate has come up with a plan to address these goals, or has to come up with a plan, I should say. Many of these people and entities have joined forces to create the local management zone that fosters collaborative, cost-effective nitrate solutions. Stakeholders in the Modesto and Turlock management zone areas initially formed the Valley Water Collaborative, or VWC for short, to serve the pink areas shown on the map to the right. Now, the VWC has expanded their efforts into priority 2 areas, which you see in the yellow areas on the map. If you're interested in learning more about the nitrate control program, I encourage you to take a look at the website shown at the bottom of this slide. So the www.cvsalinity.org/nitrate-control-program.html. So why do we care about nitrates so much and having safe drinking water? Well, back in 2012, California became one of the first states to recognize the human right to water. In Assembly Bill 685, the state's legislature established the policy that every human being has the right to safe, clean, affordable, and accessible water, adequate for human consumption, cooking, and sanitary purposes. Nitrate is just one chemical among many others that can make water unsafe to drink. And nitrate is tricky. You can't taste it, you can't smell it, you can't see it in water, you can't boil it out of your water. And at certain levels, nitrate can reduce your blood's ability to absorb oxygen. Unfortunately, there are many areas in the Central Valley that have nitrate contamination. And the only way to know if your water has high, unsafe levels of nitrate is to test the water in a laboratory. So because nitrate is such a common issue in the Central Valley, it's important to know where you get your drinking water from. If you drink water that came from a well, there are two main sources, either a privately owned domestic well or a public supply well that provides water to a public water system. If you pay a water bill, then you likely get your water from a public supply well. If you get your water from a private domestic well, then you might need to take action to find out if your well has high levels of nitrate, since most homes that rely on private domestic wells do not have a treatment system to remove nitrate. As I mentioned, the best way to find out how much nitrate might be in your water, a sample must be tested in a laboratory. Public supply wells that provide water to a public water system are required by the state or county to be regularly tested for nitrate and many other chemicals. Public water systems are also required to provide their customers with the results of those laboratory tests in a document called Consumer Confidence Reports, which are available online at the state's Division of Drinking Water website. Private domestic wells, on the other hand, are not required to be regularly tested, so a well test would be needed to measure the amount of nitrate in that water. The Valley Water Collaborative is currently trying to help identify areas where drinking water might have elevated or high nitrate levels by characterizing nitrate water quality in groundwater in each area. We're doing this in order to help locate domestic wells in areas that might have unsafe nitrate levels. So now we'll talk about what we're doing to find out where groundwater might be impacted by high levels of nitrate in their drinking water. The Valley Water Collaborative is using science to help us identify areas where nitrate is high and may be unsafe in groundwater and translate that into figuring out how many domestic wells and residents might be affected by nitrate. So we start this by gathering as much data or information on groundwater nitrate conditions as possible. This can involve gathering and compiling publicly available groundwater quality nitrate concentration measurements and supplementing that with data requests to local county departments of health and the groundwater sustainability agencies in the area that might have extra nitrate data. We're most interested in recent conditions, so we focused on data from 2010 and on. We did some mapping to help categorize nitrate data into different well depth categories. We used a statistics tool to estimate nitrate levels in groundwater between known data points in order to develop maps of current nitrate conditions. We're primarily focused on the upper portion of the groundwater aquifer called the upper zone. The upper zone is the part of the groundwater where most domestic wells pump drinking water from. The map on the right is an example of the preliminary view of groundwater nitrate levels in groundwater in the upper zone since 2010 across the entire Valley Water Collaborative management zone areas. So now I'm going to walk through these maps for the 3 southern proposed management zones in VWC. So the Delta Mendota proposed management zone in the southwest, the Madera proposed management zone in the southeast, and the Merced proposed management zone to the east of Delta Mendota and north of Madera and Chowchilla. So starting with the Delta Mendota proposed management zone, we developed the map on the right that shows areas where unsafe levels of nitrate may be in the drinking water tapped into by private domestic wells. So we use these maps to help identify potentially affected residents in order to make estimates about the number of private domestic wells and population of residents located in areas that might have high nitrate. The state has identified a safe drinking water limit called the maximum contaminant level, or MCL, for nitrate of 10 milligrams per liter as nitrogen, or as N. We're also concerned with levels of nitrate that may not currently be over the safe drinking water limit, or MCL, but are close. So for that reason, we're using the color scheme on the left to identify areas that we're calling elevated nitrate, and that's going to be represented by the red color and the orange color. So the red color represents areas with high levels of nitrate above the safe drinking water limit, or MCL. And the orange color represents areas with nitrate levels above 3/4 of the safe drinking water limit, or above 7.5 milligrams per liter as nitrogen. So this map shows you the locations of known domestic wells as well. Those are the little black dots that you see on the map. And the public water system boundaries, which are the blue shaded areas. So here we have a view of the proposed Madera management zone's upper zone recent ambient nitrate levels. And again, the little black dots represent the locations of domestic wells, and the blue shaded areas are public water system boundaries. The red areas indicate areas where nitrate may be above the safe drinking water limit, or MCL, and represent areas that might have unsafe levels of nitrate. The orange areas indicate areas where nitrate levels are potentially elevated, but not above the MCL. And lastly, we have the proposed Merced management zone's upper zone recent ambient nitrate levels. And again, the little black dots are representing locations of domestic wells, and the blue shaded areas are public water system boundaries. And VWC's highest concern right now are the areas that are in red and orange.
Barb, let me insert here for something to clarify. So the program identifies through different sources the addresses that are located in the red and the orange. We do pretty active postcard mailings in those areas and have been in the Modesto Turlock Basin. However, we accept and will sample wells throughout the basin. And we have learned in our 2 years, 3 years of testing wells in Modesto, that some of the wells in the red are not above the standard and some of the wells in the green are above the standard. So what this mapping shows you, it gives you a rough idea, but really it's the testing at the end of the day that determines whether someone gets water supplied. Because we do outreach at various events. We're hoping to get publicity in local papers where people will apply, even from cities. In fact, some of the stats you saw earlier were pretty elevated because we get a lot of people that apply that live in cities that are on municipal systems. So just to clarify that we are open to test any well of any rural residents in our basin that applies to the program.
Right, and you can just see from these maps how different the water quality can be. In small locations, you can go from a red to a green very quickly. So you can imagine that, you know, you might be fine, but your neighbor isn't, or your neighbor is fine and you're not, you know, potentially things like that. So groundwater and nitrate can be very variable. Okay, so now let's translate all those colorful shaded areas, dots and blue shapes into counts, numbers of preliminary domestic well counts and population counts of residents. And this will help us understand and plan for the early action plan, which Jackie will discuss shortly. So the table here summarizes the preliminary number of privately owned domestic wells located outside of the public water system boundaries that may have elevated nitrate. So basically, we're counting up the number of little black dots that were in the orange and red areas, but outside of the blue shaded areas, because we assume that the blue shaded areas, those people have access to public water supply, which is regulated by the state or county and should be provided or should be providing safe drinking water to those customers. So using the 2022 census data, we can estimate the population of residents located outside the blue shaded areas. So basically outside of those known public water system boundaries and within areas of potentially elevated nitrate. So again, the orange and red areas. So in the Delta Mendota area, we have estimated that there are just over 400 domestic wells located outside public water systems that are located in the orange and red areas or with elevated nitrate potentially. The census data indicates that this translates to a population of about 6,700 residents. For the Madera area, we have estimated that there are almost 80 privately owned domestic wells outside of public water systems that are located in areas that might have elevated nitrate. That translates to a population of about 3,560 residents. And lastly, for the Merced area, we have estimated that there are 520 domestic wells in elevated nitrate areas and almost a possible 20,450 residents outside public water system boundaries with potentially elevated nitrate. So this gives you a sense of the scale of the nitrate issue in each of these management zone areas. And again, this will be important information when we look for drinking water solutions in our early action plan going forward, which Jackie's going to discuss now. Take it away, Jackie.
Sorry, go ahead. You were going to use it.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm gonna go over thank you for coming to the meeting today. And I'm gonna go over the deliverables that the technical team is working on for submittal to the regional board. So the next slide, please. So for what is an early action plan? So part of the management zones, they are required by regional board to develop and implement short and long-term solutions to ensure the resident access to safe drinking water where those like the unsafe nitrate levels that Barb had discussed earlier, mainly like the orange and the red areas. And so the early action plan or the EAP is part of the deliverable to the preliminary management zone proposal, also known as the PMZP, which I'll go over later in this presentation. And so for the early action plan, it's the management zones plan, or in this case, the Valley Water Colors plan, to test the wells, determine if they're impacted by nitrate and where does the where is it needed to provide immediate drinking water, safe drinking water to rural residents. And so on the bar chart on the bottom, we kind of discussed it right earlier, but anything essentially greater than 10 parts per million or 10 milligrams per liter, that's considered unsafe nitrate drinking water levels, and the state drinking water limit MCL is 10 for nitrate. So the draft early action plan, like Perry had mentioned earlier, is available for review and comment right now to the public. It is on Valley Water Collaborative's website under the About tab, and we're asking for the public to review and complete the review and provide any comments by November 1st so that we can incorporate the comments and have it ready for the final submittal to Regional Board. So next slide, please. I'm going to go over the key elements of the early action plan. So we've identified 4 key elements, and I'll kind of go over a high-level review in clockwise order from the top. So the first category, the first element we've identified is having the non-discharge coordination. So this is kind of developing the processes to ensure we have coordination with the local, regional, and the state agencies. The next item or next element is the schedule and funding. We need to make sure we identify in the early action plan what's the funding mechanisms, and just to make sure there's a schedule in place to identify the milestones of the early action plan. The third element is the replacement water program. This includes a nitrate well testing program, and also depending on the well testing results, which I'll go over later, it also provides, identifies 3 potential replacement water options, such as bottled water delivery, water fill stations, and or the point of use systems. And then the last element we have identified is just community engagement. Essentially, the reason that we're here today is to, get the community engaged and also get input on the early action plan, and eventually input on identifying all the proposed solutions, potential solutions when we get further into the nitrate control program. So the focus of today's presentation will be on the third element I mentioned, the replacement water program. The next slide, please. So this is kind of like the key elements that I kind of mentioned earlier on the early action plan that's out for public draft right now, like I mentioned, on Valley Water Collaborative's website. We do encourage the public to go ahead and review it and to provide any comments to Valley Water Collaborative by this Friday. And I'll kind of break down what the main table of contents has right here. So if people are strapped on time or just really want a really high level summary of what the EAP contains, I would suggest you to read the executive summary. This provides a high level overview of the program and also ways for a resident to contact the Valley Water Collaborative. It is also translated into Spanish, and it kind of gives you a high level of the entire document in about a few pages. I forget how many pages that is. The next components I want to bring your attention to is the section 5, which is community outreach during the EAP implementation. I'll go over the milestones later towards the end of the presentation, but essentially once the early action plan implementation begins, which is about end of February of next year, 2025, this section it discusses the various community outreach events that the Valley Water Collaborative will be conducting. They will be advertising these future events, and that will also provide opportunities for residents to participate and to provide your feedback on the nitrate control program. And then the last main section I want to draw your attention to is the section 6. So that is the interim replacement water program. It's the meat of the nitrate control program. This section provides details on how a resident can participate in the interim replacement water program. And so this includes the free well testing. And based on the results of their well testing, it also provides information on how do you get replacement water. And next slide, please. I'll go into those next steps right now. So the 3 options that we've identified in the EAP for consideration are home bottled water delivery, installation of a point of use treatment system in your home. We also use the acronym POU treatment, or you can visit a local water fill station to fill water bottles if that's a desired option from the community. So all 3 options are free to residents. It's there's no cost to you to obtain any one of these. as long as you meet the criteria that I'll go over next and depending on your nitrate lab results. Next slide, please. So this slide goes more into the two of the options, which is the bottled water and the point of use system. So for the home bottled water delivery system, the VWC, they will be contracting with the bottled water vendor. And we're looking at the bottled water to be provided either in 1, 3, or 5 gallon jugs. And we're looking at initially a monthly frequency of delivery to the residents. We do provide in other 1 and 3 gallons, not just 5 gallons. The Valley Water Collaborative is cognizant that sometimes it is harder to lift the larger jugs. And the residents would be, once they're signed up under this option, they would coordinate with the bottled water vendor on just the volume and delivery and schedule pickup and what size bottles they would like to have. The other option on the right side of the slide, that is the installation of the point of use system. So you can kind of see the schematic, the piping on the left. It's typically installed where drinking water is used for primarily drinking and cooking. That's usually in the kitchen sink countertop area. The left, you see the water line going to the sink. That left faucet is untreated water. And the piping that goes to the right of that, it shows the point of use device. And then that faucet right there is the one that would provide the treated drinking water. So this same thing with the bottled water delivery, the Valley Water Collaborative would be contracting with the vendor to install and maintain the point of use POU system. And this option does require additional testing of other constituents besides nitrate. And depending on the criteria for installation, this may not always be a viable interim replacement option for the residents. If that's not a viable one, then there's always the other two options, which is the home bottled water delivery or the water fill station. Next slide, please. So the water fill station, this one is like a vending machine or kiosk that dispenses water as shown in the pictures on the right-hand side. The source of water to these stations is from a municipal public drinking water supply that already meets state and federal drinking water standards. Again, this option also is no cost to the user. And the resident can use up to 5 gallon size containers to fill them up. So this option would only be implemented and also during next year's EAP implementation is when the Valley Water Collaborative will have meetings with each of the communities and to understand if there is a need or if there is a desire to put one of these within the communities and to identify where those locations would be. So that's the one on water fill stations. And then the next slide, please. So before all those options are to begin, I mentioned earlier about section 6 in the EAP, we go into detail how the resident may participate. So this goes into kind of one of the first steps for participation in the program. A resident would need to complete the program application form. That is, it will be available on Valley Water Collaborative's website. The one that's currently out there right now is for the Priority 1 management zones, but there will be one next year once the EAP implementation begins that will be encompassing both Priority 1 and Priority 2 areas. So the application is on the website and will be on the website updated. It will be in both English and Spanish. And so before a resident were to complete the application, they should confirm and make sure they can meet the 3 criteria that we have on the screen right here. So the first one is that is your home, your residence within the Valley Water Collaborative prior to proposed management zones such as the Delta Mendota, Eastern San Joaquin, Madera, Merced, or Yolo subbasins. The second item that you would need to answer yes to is, are you willing to sign an agreement with the service provider that Valley Water Collaborative would be contracting with? And then the third one is, based on the nitrate well testing, does your well have unsafe nitrate water levels, which means that your nitrate drinking water results is greater than 10 milligrams per liter. And that is conducted through a laboratory test. So if you answer yes to all of those, then you can proceed with completing the form online. If a resident does not have access to the internet, please feel free to contact the Valley Water Collaborative and a representative can help you with completing the form, mailing you a form, or possibly doing it over the phone. And if you don't know if your well has unsafe nitrate levels and you're within the management zone, feel free to contact the Valley Water Collaborative and a representative will test your well at no cost to you. Similar to what kind of like Terry had mentioned earlier, that the heat maps that were presented earlier, those are just kind of estimation based on existing well test results. But if you really want to know what your well has, do contact the Valley Water Collaborative to get a test done. The well test is free for all residents within the management zone. And so yeah, please contact them to get a well test result. And then based on your well test result, next slide, please. That will kind of go over to the next step. So like I mentioned, you can either apply online, contact the BWC by phone or email, or when they have the community events next year, tabling events, the one most likely be applications available, and you can do it in person as well too. So once the Valley Water Collaborative approves your well test, they will send a representative to come to your home to test your well, again, at no cost to you. The results will be provided to you. And based on those results, that kind of determines what are your next steps. And the chart to the right side of the screen. So if your levels are over 10 milligrams per liter, that is considered over the drinking water level. And Valley Water Collaborative will immediately contact the resident and start putting you in touch with replacement water service as quickly as possible. If your result is between 7.5 to 10 milligrams per liter, it is considered safe, but it is kind of high. So we understand there could be fluctuations in the groundwater. So within a year, there will be an opportunity. The Valley Water Collaborative will contact the resident again to do an annual follow-up well testing. And based on that, that kind of goes back to the beginning. Your results will determine where your next steps here. And then if your nitrate well result is less than 7.5 milligrams per liter, that's considered low to moderate. And there will be no need for additional testing, nitrate testing under the early action plan. So the next slide, please. Next slide. So I'm going to go over the next steps and the other deliverables that I kind of mentioned earlier. So this slide kind of shows our key milestones for the EAP implementation. So starting on the left-hand side of the slide, so the regional board sent all the permitted dischargers their notice to comply last year on December 29th. And so after that bubble, we are kind of here right now. Today, technical team is working with the Valley Water Collaborative on submitting the regulatory documents, which is the preliminary management zone proposal, the PMZP, which also includes the early action plan, the EAP that I just discussed. And that plan is due on December 28th of this year. Once that is submitted, that starts the clock, and the early action plan implementation will begin February 26, 2025, unless there's an issue from the Central Valley Regional Water Board. This is when we're anticipating the early action plan to begin. That on February 26th, and after that, that is when the resident may go in and start contacting the BWC to go ahead and get their free well testing and based on the test results, get the replacement water in place. So as the early action plan implementation occurs, the technical team would be working with the Valley Water Collaborative on submitting the final management zone proposal, which we're estimating a due date of December next year of 2025. And then after that document is submitted, then that will trigger the management zone implementation plan. That's a more heftier document. That one does include a program to identify long-term drinking water solutions. And we're estimating the timeframe of that deliverable to be due to regional board around December of 2026. So these dates here are, the dates that we have there are based on our experience working with the priority 1 area and when the regional board will be approving the documents. So all along, while the top bubbles are along that pathway, the early action plan is implemented, and that part continues until the long-term drinking water solution is implemented under the MZIP. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is kind of a table identifying the events that we have so far regarding participation with the community. We had our first event back in August on the 13th and the 15th. There were two separate dates to try to get more community turnout on that one, and that one can introduce the nitrate control program and development early action plan. We then held a second event, second meeting on October 10th. And at that one, we did discuss the alternatives to provide safe drinking water while the long-term solutions are being developed. We also went over the EAP, the contents and the key elements of that. Again, it is out on Valley Water Collaborative's website under the About tab. And we are asking for the public to, review the document and provide your comments by this Friday, November 1st. The August and October presentations were virtual. And those, if you need to go back and look at those are available on Valley Water Collaborative's website under the meetings tab. The recordings are placed there. And then we're here today at our third event. We have a hybrid, both in person and through Zoom. It's today and tomorrow. It's similar content. Today we focus on 3 of the 5 sub-basins, and we review the early action plan and discussing the next steps for the PMZP. So we're working on the PMZP right now. We're anticipating the public draft to be released soon for the public review. And then once the early action plan implementation begins, there's plenty of opportunities next year as well to provide any input that there is on the program. And next slide, please. So the preliminary management zone proposal, also known as the PMZP, this one is a heftier document. This is also a more technical document compared to the early action plan. And so some of the key elements I want to go over here and draw your attention to. So for sections 2 and 3, this provides the water quality information and the general description on each of the 5 proposed management zones that will be administered by the VWC. If you would like to, you can go ahead and read that. That part's very technical. Sections 4 and 5, I'm going to draw your attention to that area. That does provide information on the permitted discharges that have elected to comply with the nitrate control program by selecting path B, which is to join the VWC. So section 5, that provides a summary of the permitted discharges that agreed to participate. It summarizes the current nitrate treatment and the control efforts or management practices for their discharge based on their waste discharge requirement permits. So I believe there's quite a few dischargers on this in this meeting right now too. So for any of the dischargers, I would draw your attention to these sections right here when it's available for public review, to review this section and let us know if you have any concerns with the summaries that will be in there under section 5. It is based off of the public available waste discharge requirements. If you do have any concerns about that, then please do reach out during the comment period. And then also, again, if you are a permitted discharger listening to this meeting, if you have not already informed the VWC of your intent to join, please do so by this Friday by completing the participant, I think it's the permitting participant survey that you guys would have received a link to. If you inform us by November 1st, we will include your facility in the PMZP. That will serve as your notice of intent to the regional board, and there's no, you don't have to do anything else. However, if you decide to join later and miss the deadline, then you will have to submit your notice of intent on your own to the regional board by February 26, 2025. And you want to add something?
Yeah, Jackie, I had a communication with the regional water board staff yesterday and reiterated that question and informed me that permit holders do have to file the notice of intent, even if they're in our plan. Which,
okay.
That's Angela Cleaver's
Okay.
response. So I think the deadline is past. Our deadline is it's the 1st of next year.
Yeah.
To submit that, but I think it's a double safe
okay.
way to make sure you're included.
Okay.
It would be early next year, isn't it?
February 26th, that dischargers have to submit their notice of intent. So
Yeah.
I guess with the new news, then you still have to submit your notice of intent. So it's, yeah, still complete the survey because we'll put your summaries inside the PMZP, but okay, so yeah, thank you, Perry, for confirming that with
Surprised to meet you.
Angela. Okay, so
Is anyone else not hearing anything anymore?
Looks like Perry's on mute.
Okay.
Sorry, everybody, I did that.
Uh,
Go ahead again.
where did I leave off then?
After the survey.
Oh, okay.
We mentioned the date.
Okay, so yeah, so based on what Perry had mentioned, his discussion of regional board, all the permitted dischargers, please do complete your notice of intent, per, Perry's recent discussion with regional board. You will have until February 26, 2025. But as Maureen had mentioned earlier, please do also complete the permitting participation survey that went out so that we can go ahead and start summarizing, your order and including it within the PMZP by November 1st, which is this Friday. And then the other item I want to draw everyone's attention to is section 6, which is the early action plan development section. So this one is just a summary of the early action plan that I had went over earlier. The early action plan in its entirety is considered as an attachment to the PMZP submittal. So this is essentially a summary of that other document. Like I mentioned earlier, we're working on this right now and we're aiming to provide it out for public comment. Between November 22nd to December 9th, they'll be available for public commenting. And I encourage you all to go to the BWC's website to go ahead and review that. And next slide, please. So this kind of provides more information on the Valley Water Club's website and how to contact Perry if you have any questions. There's also, if you just want to know generally on the nitrate control program, there's a link for that. And if anybody's curious as to the previous, the submittals from priority 1 that I mentioned about the FMZP and MZIPs, those are located on the CV Salt's website. So I would encourage anybody who's listening that has not signed up for the Valley Water Collaborative to please go on their website, sign up there, and that way you can get kind of like the firsthand information, especially on future activities, announcements, especially next year once the EAP implementation begins. And you'll also be notified as well when the documents, especially the PMCP, will be out for public review. And that's all I got, and I'll turn that over back to Perry now. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Jackie, and excuse me for hitting that mute and repeating that information. So that is pretty much our presentation for today. Welcome any comments or questions from those in the audience on Zoom audience related to anything that was covered here, or it looks like most of you folks are permit holders, so we'll open it up to other questions as well that are beyond just the scope of this conversation. Okay, we must have covered everything. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And if you haven't already, I think most of you are on our mailing list. Encourage others to go to the Valley website and put your name and contact info in that contact box. We'll make sure to send you any other announcements that are related to this program. So thanks, everybody.